happened. Joining us right now, our foreign policy expert, Stephen Yates, is just that at the D.C. International Advisory, also former advisor to former VP Dick Cheney. Stephen, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, Dana.
This do we know the latest? Is Hillary Clinton going to testify finally, or are we still getting excuses?
Well, I think we're still getting excuses to a degree. I saw a message from the House Foreign Affairs Committee saying that they had heard word that she will be scheduled to testify sometime in January. It doesn't matter so much whether she is still Secretary of State or whether John Kerry or someone else may have relieved her by that point. At some point, she does have an obligation to appear if Congress calls her. So far, they seem determined to do it, but we are hearing it's delay.
Right. And you would think that, too. It seems that that's just the most obvious. She's Secretary of State, and this, from many different reports and from the intel community, all of the direction of what happened at the consulate in Benghazi goes all the way up to the top, which, to me suggests her. And they need to. It just seems like the most obvious step. And to me, them not wanting to work and cooperate signals that they're hiding something. They're covering something.
No doubt in my mind. I think this recent independent report basically did what it was tasked to do, which was deflect attention away from the politics and policy fiascos that actually brought us the controversy and fed the tragedy, and focused instead on operational and bureaucratic matters. And the net result was some bureaucrats left their jobs, but basically effectively pushed attention away from why did the administration lie. Why was Hillary Clinton not the person chosen to go on the talk shows on that fateful day? And basically, where was she and what did she do? And as this was unfolding, so there's clearly questions that the Senate, that has the committees that have oversight over her and her department, have every right to ask, and she has every obligation to answer.
What do you make of the excuse that she gave? I know John Bolton said that she was just suffering from some sort of diplomatic illness.
Well, John is pretty good at diagnosing what ails the State Department. He certainly put his time in there, checking what the top level of that bureaucracy does. Number one, I can't know whether she really hurt herself. I would not want to say ill things about someone if they were actually hurt. It's very, very odd, though, and they've given almost no details to back up the claim. And it is awfully convenient in terms of timing. So if she's deserving of sympathy, I'd be willing to give it, but they're doing nothing to justify the sympathy, really.
Exactly. John Kerry had said, well, Congress is partially to blame for this as well. You can't put the full weight of this on the State Department. What do you make of that? Because that seems to me, again, like more deflection.
I think it's one of the more obvious and outrageous, ignorant things Senator Kerry has ever said. It shows his complete lack of experience with anything having to do with an executive authority. He spent his entire adult life in the Senate, so he offers opinions and asks questions. But when you're an executive, you are responsible for operational things that are happening now, and of course, you have to give an accounting of those things. And so I actually fear for where the department may go with him as potentially secretary, except I'm confident it will be someone else, likely his deputy, that will actually be running things. But it's just a blatant ignorance of the responsibilities of being an executive.
What does it signal to you, the officials who resigned in the wake of this report on the State Department and on Benghazi? You had the Assistant Secretary of State for Diplomatic Security and several other individuals. Is there anything significant about these particular individuals, or were these just folks that you think were willingly they volunteered to go under the bus?
Well, I don't know whether they voluntarily did it. They probably, if they have a conscience, recognize they had some responsibility for decisions that were made that resulted in the death of 4 Americans abroad. And the first time in 30 years an American had been assassinated as a U.S. ambassador. So I think that perhaps that was what's driving them. But also the bureaucratic and political pressure was being pushed down on these mid-levels in these bureaucracies to keep it away from the White House and the principal level at the State Department, where they say the political and policy questions were being addressed, like what is terrorism, what is Al-Qaeda, and are we winning or not?
Right. When this accountability review board, when they came out with this report, one of the things that they had said was that that top State Department officials had performance inadequacies in their duties, but by law they couldn't recommend any sort of disciplinary measures because they couldn't find that someone had purposefully been negligent. Explain a little. Is there some sort of law that would prevent them from doing so? Because it seems here you have individuals that it seems that they're leaving because of a dereliction in duty. There are admitted mistakes that have been made. Perhaps I'm being just a little too eager in it, but it just seems that there should be some sort of follow up, and all we keep hearing are excuses.
Well, we definitely are not getting the transparency that has been multiple times promised by this administration. I do understand a little bit running a small business on my own that sometimes there are regulations about what you can and cannot say about the cause for someone's termination if you did terminate them for cause. And maybe there's some HR regulation that's standing in the way of this. But certainly as a policy matter, the institution of the State Department should be able to say something about whether these terminations were with cause or for cause, or they basically have told us that these people chose to resign. Ultimately, frankly, that matters a little less to me than our representatives in Congress continuing to focus on why did the administration choose to give the false narrative? Why did they lie? And are we still being governed by people who refuse to name terrorists, Islamists, and others as our enemy, basically leaving us vulnerable for future attack?
Right. I want to switch it up and ask you one quick question about the press conference that the president gave yesterday, wherein he discussed the Sandy Hook tragedy and gun control. And he mentioned that his gun task force that he was creating, that Joe Biden was also going to be overseeing, was going to include the ATF, the same ATF that was supposed to have overseen Fast and Furious. What is your response to that decision from the administration?
Well, there's this sarcastic part of me that says that I have great hope that Vice President Biden has been put in charge of this, since he has a near-perfect track record of accomplishing little. So I think he could be the perfect leader to basically wave a flag, and no real outcome comes from this task force. Also, White House task forces, or any task force generally, tends to be a PR exercise because you haven't figured out anything else you can do, and it gives a false sense of motion and action. Now, the cynicism aside, I think it is terrible that really we are focusing on an institution that clearly is broken and in need of reform and probably new leadership in terms of the impact that Fast and Furious had in the nexus between the Justice Department itself and the ATF. And the fact that we're going to focus on one tragedy in one community in America, how horrible it may have been, while probably completely ignoring the causes of, say, things as diverse as Fort Hood and Fast and Furious, just leads me to believe this is not really going to recommend any kind of solution our society needs.
Right. Stephen Yates, D.C. International Advisory, DCIadvisory.org. Stephen, it is always a pleasure. I so have appreciated your contributions. I look forward to talking to you more in the new year. Merry Christmas to you, my friend.
Merry Christmas, Dana. Thank you to you and all your listeners.
Thank you. Take